Hi guys, welcome to the channel. Today we are finally starting the gear swap installation. You guys asked for it, I'm bringing it to you. We got the experts on it. I want to go over some details of how the truck's currently shifting with the 37-inch tires that we got and the stock 342 gears. We're gonna head on over to Chester County Transmissions, and it's gonna be a long day, so you know, get in the recliner, put your feet up, get your popcorn. It's going to be good, informative, and you guys are going to love the video, especially the guys that have been looking for it for some time. And I don't think there's any install videos of a 4th gen Ram gear swap filmed from start to finish. If you guys missed the first video, there's a part 1. We did an unboxing at Chester County Transmissions. Part 2 is this video. Long time coming, man. I'm pumped. I'm excited. So, got my monster. Let's get on the road. You'll hear it, it struggles. The shifts are kind of, they're soft if you can hear me. GoPro audio is not that great. Right now I'm just under 2 grand. We just shifted into 5th gear already, and we're doing about 55 miles per hour. So, and that seems to be the main problem. It does okay, even though the shifts are very soft, and it struggles from the lower gears to the higher gears, but it really has a problem from 4th to 5th gear. It gets really confused, even when you're on a flat roadway, of what gear to shift into, and it'll bounce back and forth, 4th, 5th, 4th, 5th, and eventually, after it does it 2 or 3 times, it'll throw a transmission code for invalid gear ratio. It's happened to me recently, probably 3 times in the last 2 months, because I catch it and I sort of stop it. Alright, we're rolling up to a stop, and on the other side of this stop there's a hill, so I'm gonna let this car in front of me, always getting phone calls, I'm gonna let this car in front of me get some distance, and then I'm gonna get on it a little bit, and I'll tell you what gear I'm hitting. Hopefully you guys can hear it on the audio. 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and we are 50 miles per hour. That's putting a hurting on the trans. It's putting a real hurting on the trans and the drive line. But and you heard it. It struggled. I don't do that too often, just for that reason. I don't want to break anything. Forgot to mention, we'll have small mediums on the site. Probably by the time this video is live, we'll have them on the site. We are almost at Chester County Transmissions, getting ready to begin this install. I can't freaking wait, guys. I can't wait. I can't wait to see the difference. And most of you guys know, my long-term followers, the wife and I, well, I do. The wife does peruse the comments. I read every single comment, and I know you guys are pumped just as much as I am. All right, guys, I spared you the tire removal and all that jazz. Pete's gonna remove the drive shaft first. There it is. 15mm bolts. Yep. Hawking drive shaft. It's aluminum at least. Yes, it is. Step 1 done. Yes. 200 more to go. Yeah.
The next step is to get this out of the way. This won't allow us to work in this area, so you unzip these, usually get a bungee cord, move it to the back. That's out of the way. That's all. Right now, undo all the bolts on the pan or the cover, drain the fluid. Once we got the pan off and the fluid out, we'll be able to look at what's going on inside, make marks that we have to make. washer. And there it is. That's your ring. Can't see the pinions in the front. The interior is different. 2 carrier caps, and these are the locking fingers to hold spanner nut.
Andy again, Chester County Transmissions. Just want to go over a few key points at this point. Obviously, you guys have met Pete. We're moving along pretty well with this. So, some do's, some don'ts. First, most important thing. We kind of talked about this before. These caps underneath these are the carrier bearings. They are, when this whole differential assembly is manufactured and machined, it's done what's called a line bore, where it's constructed, big old bit comes through and cuts the spot where the bearing is going to go. Okay. So because of that, these caps have to go back exactly where they came from. So a lot of guys like to just start ripping and tearing. They're going to start blowing these caps off, and then they get mixed up. Huge problems. What can happen then is the clamping force on the actual bearing race isn't proper. So that can cause premature bearing failure. And again, we're not going through this to have that. So what we're going to do is we're going to mark these. You can do it however you want. You usually want to use some sort of a marking material or mechanism that's going to be permanent. So this is paint which was put on prior to any solvents being put on, so that paint's still there. What we're going to use is a drift. You can get ones that are numbered, or you can just put what Pete's likely going to do is just put 1 dot here on the case, 1 dot on this one, and maybe 2 dots on this one, 2 dots over here. Realistically, you could just put 1 dot on 1 dot here, because by process of elimination we know where they are. But the point is, mark them, don't get them mixed up, because it's important for reassembly. This is a free floating axle assembly, so what that means is this axle actually is bolted on right here. So what we'll do next, in order to remove this assembly, Pete will go ahead and unbolt all of these. The whole axle will slide out. So we're not dealing with any clips. A lot of different differential assemblies will have axle clips that secure the axle in the side gears or spider gears. In the carrier, that's not the setup here. This is a little bit easier because you're not having to deal with that. But yeah, so we're going to get those axles out. We'll get our caps marked. We'll get those off, and then we'll be able to actually remove the assembly. We may need to back these spanners off a few turns. Depends on how tight it is, but we're certainly well on our way. So we went with the 1 on this side and the 2 on that side. I knew I was going to get it right.
What do you say?
Ram beast.
We were doing a Dana 60, caliper, rotor, then the axle. But we are doing this beast. Removing the carrier assembly. That requires taking the carrier caps off. We've already marked the caps so we know which way they go, where they lived before. I'm used to doing Danas, and so these are held in place on the Dana with a style of nut or spanner nut that you access through the length of the tube. This is not that style.
Sometime I believe after 2012 with the 4th gen Rams, they switched to American axle manufacturing from the Danas. So it's completely, as we're learning, completely different setup from those Danas. The 4th gen Rams, they have 11.5 rear and 11.8. Most Rams that have the coil springs, if not all of them, have 11.5.
All right. Holy crap. Carrier and ring. Now you'll notice this pinion is noticeably larger than the one that you got.
Yeah.
And there are more teeth.
Yep.
And that's how the ratio change is going to occur between your pinion and your ring, which will allow you to relax the engine a little bit, bigger tires, won't be putting as much strain on the tranny, and you'll be able to climb steeper hills.
I'm learning, guys. I'm learning. I hope you guys are too. It's very interesting. Don't know if I would ever want to do this on my own. Viewers are going to appreciate this. Look at that. That thing's huge. It's pinion removal time, ladies and gents.
That's it. Yep. There it is.
Hammer it the other way?
Yep. Hammer the pinion.
There should be.
That's a mighty crush collar. That's what sets the preload. That unit right there. Seal out, this bearing out, and then pop the races. Off to the races.
Nice catch.
There it is. An oil seal. And the pinion snout roller bearings right there. Now we're going to clearance to make a setup bearing. Once we pop it off the pinion, ground the inside, it's press fit. And you ground the inside where it meets the pinion down here so that it will slide right on. And that way we can set the pinion back in the housing, check our mark, make our paint, check our pattern, and then if we like what we see, we go with that shim. There's going to be a shim or a set of shims underneath this. Now if everything goes right, we use the same amount of shims and it's set by the factory for this housing, and hopefully that's all we need. But you don't want to go in there, because if you get it wrong, the only way to change it is to get these shims subtracted or added. And you could buy 5 bearings and just blow through 5 bearings, or make a setup.
Let's not do that.
Nope.
You're removing the races?
Yep. That's the other one.
It's only got 10,000 miles.
Yeah.
This should look good.
It looks good. 10,000 miles. There are a couple lines in this. Actually, we're starting to gall right there. Focus. We got to get this pinion bearing off the pinion itself using this special tool that goes underneath. If we're lucky, pulls it off in one piece. We may not be lucky.
Oh, no. My pinion shaft's too big for it. See, my wife was right. Smitty problems. She's always right. We got Smitty problems. Just like my wife called it.
What'd you call it?
She said, "You're gonna have Smitty problems." And that's, we always run into these things.
The biggest one we have won't drive it? Oh, jeez. Right now, to the brush. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Now we're going to use a clamshell. Hope to get it done that way. I think it's going to break.
Yep.
Torch it.
Yeah, I would say torch it.
We don't need to use this bearing as a setup bearing, as the replacement pinion diameter where that race lives is narrower, so we couldn't even use this one as a setup. We'll have to order another new bearing and customize it to use it for the setup. We can stop trying to remove this bearing. We don't need to.
And how did we confirm that?
Taking the micrometer, getting the diameter where this pinion lives, or this pinion bearing lives. This one was, what did I say, 2128, and the replacement 2002.
Oh, by the way, the kits do have pinion nuts.
They're hidden. They were hidden. Typically, they're out in the open. You know, they're usually right here, and you can clearly see them in all the shrink wrap. A quick update, guys. There's concern with the pinion head bearing because we need something for setup. Because we're going with a original stock ratio to a different ratio, there's concern that the dimensions of the pinion gear were going to be different. And of course, they're off by about 1,000. So, you know, then that's all it takes. So we're not able to use the stock pinion head bearing as a setup bearing. So what I was able to do was right here, you know, if we look here on the back side of the bearing, so this is your typical cone bearing. This is the outside race, so it lives like that in the vehicle. This is in a case of the differential. This lives on the pinion, basically like that, but you see it won't go down because it needs to be pressed on. So there are these numbers on the back. So here it's a Timken, which is, as far as I'm concerned, the best bearings you can get. But right here, this is the part number for the bearing. So I was able to call the local auto parts store, Napa. We're Napa Auto Care Center. So I was able to call them. Luckily, I can get one. I can have one today at 3:30, and I ordered two. Again, I'm going to hedge my bets, make sure that, you know, as we go forward, we're going to have everything we need. So I got two of these coming. This is for the rear differential, and right now I'm opening up the bearing set for the front diff. So I hopefully can do this. Hopefully, can do the same thing and get some coming for that also. So if we need to, again, this is the idea here. Is I just want to have everything on hand that we may possibly need, because we're surely going to run into something else. So. But that's a good thing for you guys to keep in mind too. If you decided to roll the dice and do this yourself, mistakes are going to happen, wrong parts are going to happen, and setup bearings are a big deal.
I'm not going to use it as a setup bearing, but underneath this bearing are shims, or there may not be shims. Whatever the factory decided as this pinion's life or living in the case, its relationship to the ring, where it is positioned, those shims are what position the pinion so you get a proper pattern on the ring. You add if you want the pinion to go deeper, subtract if you want the pinion to go closer towards the front of the case, depending on how that pattern is that you're making. So this is why we have to find out what's down there. And since we weren't able to do it with standard tools, we had to break out the flaming wrench. There we are. We're going to get a measurement of it, and we'll use the setup pack that was delivered with the kit. There should be one of the same thickness. All right, that's what we need. It's 0.060. That is our shim, and here's our shim pack. All right, it's the right size.
It's always a good sign, right?
Well, it's, yeah, this way. This is what we need to find.
The width, thickness.
Yes, all kinds of thicknesses.
Important facts to know about how this goes. So once the pinion head bearing, so this is the pinion, and the bearing that lives up against the pinion is called the pinion head bearing. Underneath that, there's always a shim from the factory. I shouldn't say always. There are a few instances where there's not, depending on the construction of the rear, where pinion depth and bearing preload can be determined by shims and spacers in other locations. So that was a little bit too carte blanche of a statement. But a lot of the rears you're going to come across, and always with this rear, you're going to have a pinion head bearing. So with a shim. So here's our shim. The interesting thing about this shim, so you can see it has these little feet. The purpose of these feet is to make sure this shim stays fairly centered on both the head and underneath the bearing. So this is our new pinion, and if you guys haven't really got a chance to see, I don't know, but there is a stark contrast between the size of these guys. I mean, big difference. Big difference. Hence the ratio change. Also the tooth count. So here is our original shim, which in a lot of instances you want to reuse. So we're going to put this guy over here, and, well, you know, maybe it's like an instrument in a mariachi band or something, I don't know. But this isn't going to work because it will not stay properly centered underneath. So now you're at home, you're in your garage, or maybe you're at your buddy's garage, and you guys decided that a case of beer and a really long weekend was going to make this work. Well, in an instance like this, you need to have shims that fit proper. Here are the shims that came with the Yukon kit even. The point to be made here is this, we slide this over, and we kind of have a similar issue, okay? Now this isn't meant to make a slight at Yukon, but it just, these are the kind of things that we come across. So we need to have something that's going to fit properly. Us being a shop that has been around since, well, 80s, we have this, which is pretty much, there's actually 2 more boxes of these in the back. So these are all the different shims that we've come across the years. So we inevitably, and it'll likely be out of this box here, if you can see that they are, all in all, these are much smaller. That's a thin shim right there. We'll be able to find the proper shims to use underneath this pinion head. It's going to take a little extra work, going to take a little extra time. You know, it's why book times can be a bit of a joke sometime when you talk about labor guides. And also when you talk about the scope of a project like this. I mean, these are, you know, things that you don't find out till you're in the middle of it. But again, if you were at home, you'd be in a bad way. Maybe you'd be smart enough to come here and ask me if I had some shims for you, which that would be cool. I'd be more than happy to help you out with some shims. We do that kind of stuff all the time. You know, we try to help everybody out when we can. So just another example of, you know, some of the stumbling blocks and solutions along the way.
All right, guys, now we're going to tear down the front and get the axles out.
24 is a popular size on this truck.
Hoping not to have to remove all this to get it out. Big Bertha.
Yes. 1.4 mucho torque.
Taking a little break on the brakes, get it? And we're gonna remove the BDS steering stabilizer and the center link underneath to get to the front diff cover. With all that good stuff removed, we can remove the diff cover. Would you look at that?
Yeah. There it is. And the front carrier, ring and pinion. It all looks good. All right, we'll do 1. And 2. Now they'll go back in the same place, in the same orientation. Using an air hammer. All right. Hit it. I do is cut all your zip ties.
Nice thing is that we didn't have to take the ball joints and all that crap out.
Alright, that's one side. Now let's do the other. Oh, nice. It is all the way in. This is what engages and disengages four-wheel drive. We need to remove this so we can get to the axle that slides into the carrier. And slide it out of the way enough that we can get the carrier out. Receiver on the brake. There it is.
So that's what engages the four-wheel drive?
Yes. Bolts that hold these spanner stays, backlash and preload to this carrier are held in place by these U-shaped devices that go through the holes in the spanner nut.
Now there's the seal in here. Dodge has an interesting setup here where there's an engager for the front axle. There's a lot of different ways that you can create a four-wheel drive system in an effort to make it so the front axle set isn't spinning all the time. They have an engager in line here. So when you select four-wheel drive, not only is the transfer case engaging, we have an engagement that happens here at the front axle. The way they did it, they created an intermediate shaft. So you have an axle shaft out here, axle shaft out here, but there's a coupler here, and that coupler is what connects this intermediate shaft to the outside shaft. The reason we have to remove the axle shafts is because they are plugged in to the side gears or spider gears or the differential, just like we saw on the back set. But again, the unique thing here is this intermediate shaft, so we have to remove it, right? But the amount of clearance that we have, thanks to Dodge, Chrysler, Ram, it's just not enough to slide that intermediate shaft out of the carrier assembly to remove it. There's just not enough room in there. So in order to get it out far enough, we actually have to remove the seal, and the seal is located inside the tube, right in the middle of the tube here, which is, as you would probably imagine, a seal right here. How does something like that get replaced? Well, you're going to find out, and it's with some ingenuity, to say the least. But it's not a big deal. It's nothing we haven't done before. And actually, it's really common. Not, I shouldn't say really common, but Chrysler did this with their Jeep line early on, where the front differential specifically, the axle seals were inboard rather than outboard. So outboard would be if it's out here where the U-joint is. Inboard meaning it's closer to the differential assembly itself. For example, the axle seal on this side is right on the other side of this adjuster. So we would consider them inboard axle seals. So just makes it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more fun, and all the more reason why we should be doing it and why we're going to get it done. So what we're looking at right here, this is the engagement teeth, the four-wheel drive engagement teeth, and it is connected to that's the actual shaft, the intermediate shaft that we've been talking about. This area right here, there's a bearing, an inner bearing that supports this shaft because it can't just float in here. It is supported by the bearing here, where, well, essentially the carrier bearing where it goes into the axle. So it needs to be supported out here. So there is a bearing that lives right here, lives on this portion of the axle. But as you can see, this axle slides back, but it stops. It won't go any further than that because it is actually hitting that seal in there. So that seal in there is the one that we're going to have to remove, which is fun in and of itself. And then the installation's even more fun. So just a good example of some of the extra heartache that you're going to run into if you decide to try to tackle one of these projects.
Yeah, no way in hell.
It's the carrier pin held in place by this nut or bolt, and we're going to see about sliding that out and extracting the spiders. There you go. Normally there's a position that you can get this in, but it comes out. That's the position. Right there. Hopefully spin. These out.
Anytime you're doing disassembly of something, you always want the pieces to go right back to where they came from. That's most ideal. With these type of gears, though, it's not nearly as crucial. When you're going straight down the road, they're actually not even turning. They're doing nothing. They're just going along for the ride. And they only come into play in turns.
I had one for my it's not for this. I like it.
Still not?
No.
You don't think there's even enough play, though, now that we have that much more?
Let's see. They didn't make it easy.
Well, if it was only like an 1/8 inch engagement, that would have been the ticket. But clearly, it's a little bit more than that, even.
It's so close.
It's not as close as we think.
We tried.
Wishful thinking.
Because I can feel where it ends, and it's right there.
You know, so essentially this here is what that intermediate shaft is splining into. The hope was by unloading this out of the carrier, you know, so if it was only engaged by, say, you know, this last quarter here, by removing this, it would grant us enough space to get out. I mean, it was certainly worth a shot. I mean, if it would have worked out, it would have been one of those great YouTube moments, but it's still a great moment because at least now you know if you were thinking that this could work out, you know it doesn't. So
No good. Boom.
There it is. Yeah. All right.
Finally.
Success, there it is. Very nice and clean, 10,000 miles it should be. Now we can work on the pinion.
Time to beat a pinion.
That's the pinion in the front. Crush collars, pretty standard, just like the Dana 60s. This one will be able to remove this bearing in the normal fashion without flaming wrench.
Pete's gonna remove the other axle seal.
Homemade seal remover. This is tool number 833-J5, otherwise known as a garage door spring compressor tool.
It works. We're going to attempt to remove the carrier bearing.
Yes.
I'm not going to say how many times we've tried. Alright, we're going to remove the carrier bearing.
Yeah, that's it. And that's one carrier bearing. Big boy's toy.
Yes, sir.
The other carrier bearing. The next step will be to clean this in the solvent tank, and then we'll be good to go.
Pete's just going to repeat the process on the front, and we're done for today. You guys will have to stay tuned for part 3. What's up, girl?
What's up?
How long you been waiting out here?
What do you think, 15 minutes? Yeah, pretty well. Not ready for that.
I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs up anyway. If you're stopping by for the first time,
subscribe!
we'll see you guys on the next upload. Love you.